Many of ECW's biggest stars wrestled for WWE either before or after they became famous in Paul Heyman's cult promotion. Whether it was pre-Monday Night Wars, during the Invasion, or for the ill-fated 2006 ECW reboot, everyone from the Dudleys and Rob Van Dam to Sabu and Tommy Dreamer to Just Incredible and Shane Douglas had their run in WWE. Some, however, barely had a whole cup of coffee working for Vince McMahon's sports entertainment empire. While they were popular players for Paul E, the following extremists may have wrestled in WWE, some of them just one time, but their appearances flew under the radar. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 ECW wrestlers you didn't know wrestled for WWE. Join us!
But first, a lot of people compare me with Brock Lesnar. We're both big, we've both got fairly awful phallic tattoos, and we both like shooting animals. Only I like to do it from the comfort of my own home. Big thanks to Hunting Clash for sponsoring today's video, featuring some of the most realistic graphics you have ever seen. With Hunting Clash, you really can feel the spirit of wild nature without stepping foot outside your door. Pow! Take that, you sentient being. Track all kinds of animals from bison to grizzly bears, then take them down in style. It's one of the most ancient traditions of humanity. Upgrade your weapon, train your hunting dog, and compete with other hunters in a huge variety of different locations. Support Cultaholic Wrestling by downloading Hunting Clash from the link in the description below and use code HUNTWithCultaholic for an incredible welcome gift worth $15. You'll get 100 gold, 70 skill tokens, and 2 mythical lure cards for free! So join me, Brock Lesnar, Shawn Michaels, and other wrestlers who love to hunt by clicking the link in the description below now.
Number 10, Ulf Herman. No, Ulf Herman wasn't the biggest ECW star or anything, but he was a familiar face in 1998 and 1999. A house show regular and member of the full-blooded Italians, Herman only wrestled 3 matches on ECW television, quick losses to Sabu, Spike Dudley, and Rob Van Dam in an ECW television title match, which proved to be his swan song from the promotion. He also made one pay-per-view appearance at the 98 November to Remember, teaming with, of all people, Mabel to lose to Spike in a handicap match. Prior to showing up in Philadelphia, Ulf mainly worked in his native Germany for Catch Wrestling Association, where he took on the likes of Fit Finlay, Papa Shango, and once the Ultimate Warrior. He also, very early in his career, made his one and only WWE appearance. Herman showed up at a mammoth WWE taping at the Louisville Gardens in Kentucky on October 28, 1992. His bout, the second of 16 that evening, wasn't televised, but was likely a dark/tryout match for WWE to take a look at Herman the German, of course that's how they billed him, and his opponent, fellow future ECW alumni Louis Spicolli. Number 9, Chilly Willy. With most of their major stars moving on to pastures new and the company having a hard time paying the existing talents, ECW was forced to give new opportunities to a crop of new stars at the turn of the millennium. Some of them had real potential, like C.W. Anderson, Christian York, and Joey Matthews, and Chilly Willy. Chilly, or should I call him Willy since that's a funny word, was a decent prospect with a good look, natural charisma, and a legitimate background in tough man competitions. After ECW kicked the bucket in early 2001, he did the indie thing for a bit and actually wrestled a couple of dark matches for WWE. He went over 2 other hopefuls at back-to-back television tapings that June. He didn't pursue the WWE dream, however, instead deciding to enlist in the US Army following 9/11. He was discharged from service in 2004 after receiving the Purple Heart and Bronze Star, and signed a developmental deal soon after, though he was released just months later. Number 8, Scotty Anton. Scotty Anton is a name that may not be too familiar to a lot of fans, but I'm sure you remember WCW star and American Males tag team member Scotty Riggs. He and Buff Bagwell had a very good run as the American Males, before he had a decent spell as a member of Raven's flock. Once it was over, he did the ECW thing, wrestling under his real name, where he engaged in a storyline with real-life friend Rob Van Dam, which culminated a match at Heatwave 2000, where Mr. Pay-Per-View unleashed the dreaded Van Terminator for the first time. Not long before signing with WCW proper, Riggs, wrestling as Scott Studd, wrestled his one and only WWE match. A non-televised outing held prior to a Wrestling Challenge taping in the summer of 1995, he lost to Gorgeous George III, who was managed by Harvey Whippleman. Gorgeous George III is, obviously, what are you, an idiot, the man who would go on to portray the Maestro in WCW. Riggs said during an RF video shoot interview that the match was designed to make his opponent, a friend of Sid Vicious, look good, but that it sucked and the subsequent blowback soured him on the WWE experience. Number 7. Jon Cronus. The Eliminators were a hot property in the mid-90s, having made their reputations in Japan and in Memphis for the USWA. WCW were interested in signing Jon Cronus and Perry Saturn and gave them a dark match at a TV taping in April 1995. 4 months later, WWE came a-calling and the Eliminators were booked for a house show in Manchester, New Hampshire. Saturn would go on to have memorable runs in WCW, WWE and elsewhere, but this would turn out to be Cronus' only outing in a McMahon-owned ring. And even though it was the second match on a routine house show, it turned out to be memorable, though not for anything that happened in the ring. Coming in with their trainer, Killer Kowalski, they weren't allowed to dress in the actual locker room and were forced to get changed in the boiler room. Then the wrestlers either ignored them or otherwise told them not to do anything impressive on the show, with only Rad Radford and Owen Hart giving them the time of day. Then, when they were in the ring, the other wrestlers started catcalling them from behind the curtain, with Shawn Michaels joking after one of them did a super kick that they should be fired immediately. The Eliminators wisely started with ECW just weeks later. Number 6. Jason Knight. Jason Knight may have been a one-time ECW television champion, but his greatest fame came as a flunky for other acts like the Impact Players. Truth is, he wasn't the best wrestler in the world, something that Paul Heyman cottoned onto and combated by trying to keep him out of the ring unless it was a non-televised live event. Jason did have television exposure heading into ECW, however, as he was one of the many future ECW stars who did jobs for WCW and WWE in the early 90s. Knight worked as an enhancement talent for WWE more than WCW, wrestling 12 matches for the company in 1992 and 93. Indeed, if you go back and watch episodes of Raw, Superstars and Wrestling Challenge from that era, you may see a fresh-faced, oiled-up Jason Knight taking on some of the industry's biggest stars. The sexiest man on earth, his words, not mine, stared at the ceiling for everyone from Ric Flair and Lex Luger to the Mountie and Rick Martel. He was slated to be part of the 2006 ECW reboot, but it never ended up happening. Number 5. Roadkill. Trained by Perry Saturn and Taz in ECW's training school, the House of Hardcore, Roadkill made quite the impression in the promotion as the Amish warrior. Usually seen tagging with Danny Doring, Roadkill wrestled in traditional Amish dress and dropped jaws by demonstrating surprising agility for such a big man. A one-time ECW tag team champion, Roadkill wasn't brought in for the invasion once the company folded, but he was at least looked at by WWE management and many years later wound up in the WWE system. His first WWE appearance was in the summer of 2001, where he and Doring lost to the FBI in a dark match at a Madison Square Garden TV taping. 4 years later, the duo would be back to put over Eminem on Velocity before Roadkill signed a WWE developmental deal and showed up very briefly as part of the rebooted ECW. Once Doring was canned, Roadkill was repackaged as Anthony Pulaski and pushed in OVW, though nothing really came of his time there. Incredibly, Bruce Pritchard once pitched him as the man to end The Undertaker's WrestleMania winning streak. I assume this was about 10 minutes before Brother Love was shown the door. Number 4. Mustafa. The Marty Jannetty of the gangsters, Mustafa was pretty much just a lesser version of New Jack. He looked menacing and was good at clouting people over the head with weapons, but at the end of the day, people remember New Jack for better or worse, while not many really give much thought to Mustafa. That might have been because he didn't, genuinely attempt to murder people in the ring. Mr. Trick there, didn't he? Before showing up in ECW, Mustafa did the indie thing and supplemented his income by doing job duty for both WCW and WWE. In January of 1991, Mustafa, wrestling as Terrence Baylock, did the honors for Mr. Perfect and Jake Roberts at a pair of Wrestling Challenge and Superstars tapings. How were the matches, you say? Why do you care, I reply. Mustafa was young and green and was basically there because he had some decent size and could at least run the ropes without tripping over his own feet. Elite. The Gangsters never made it to WWE, though New Jack had a planned tryout get cancelled in 2004 after it was rumoured that he was being considered for a feud with John Cena. Number 3, Johnny Swinger. Following an inconsistent couple of years wrestling for WCW, where he was mostly used as an enhancement talent, Johnny Swinger found success on the smaller stage of ECW. Initially coming in as a singles wrestler, Paul Heyman paired him up with another solid but underutilized performer in Simon Diamond, the pair complementing each other nicely. Sadly, ECW was circling the drain at this point, though they did take their act to other promotions like MLW and TNA once it folded. They never got a shot together in WWE, though they did both wrestle for the company separately and actually faced each other in a 2002 dark match. That was one of many dark matches that Swinger had for the company, having previously worked as jobber Joe Dorgan in 1995 before being signed to a developmental deal in 2005. Swinger, rechristened Johnny Parisi, wasn't brought in for the ECW reboot in 2006, but rather spent his time in either Deep South Wrestling or on Heat. Val Venus, Eugene, the Hurricane, Matt Stryker, Gene Snitsky, Kane, Chavo Guerrero, Shelton Benjamin, you name them, Johnny put them over on the Sunday night show. Seeing the writing on the wall, he ended up asking for and receiving his release. Number 2, 911. 911 was a perfect example of Paul Heyman accentuating somebody's positives while simultaneously trying to hide their negatives. A trainee of Larry Sharp, Al Poling, who wrestled as Al the Sledgehammer on the independent circuit, wasn't a good wrestler, but he was big and looked imposing. So Heyman booked him to basically do one thing and one thing only: chokeslam people. It got the giant over in a big way, though the novelty eventually wore off and 911 ended up fading into obscurity. Years before shacking up with Heyman and his band of merry misfits, he was just another person trying to make a name for themselves in the business, and thanks to his connection with Sharp, got booked for a pair of back-to-back New York WWE TV tapings in April 1990. On the first night, he teamed with Black Bart to lose to the Hart Foundation, while on the second, he teamed with Chris Duffy to put over the Rockers. Number 1, Steve Carino. These days, former ECW champion Steve Carino is a key part of the WWE system as a performance center coach and backstage producer. The king of old school first made his name in Paul Heyman's promotion, where he was one of the top stars in its dying days. When ECW folded, Carino had a hell of a career wrestling independently and internationally before settling into his current role. He never had a proper WWE run, but he did wrestle in several WWE matches, dating as far back as 1996, when he put over Salvatore Sincere in a dark match at a Raw taping. Carino also showed up in 1998 to wrestle dark matches, as well as some tag bouts on Shotgun Saturday Night against Kaientai and the Oddities. Then, curiously, in December 2007, the year in which he initially announced his retirement, Carino popped up for a couple of tryout dark matches, losing to D.H. Smith and then Kofi Kingston. Carino's old mentor, Dusty Rhodes, who set the tryout up, was hopeful that the company would offer him a deal, but Vince McMahon was reportedly disgusted at his appearance, particularly his forehead full of scar tissue. Carino's, that is, not Dusty's.
Thanks again to Hunting Clash for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description below to download, and I'll see you on the game for a nice big hunt.